Charles Whitman, the Texas Tower Sniper. August 1st, 1966, Austin, Texas. A former Marine named Charles Joseph Whitman climbed to the 28th floor observation deck of the University of Texas Clock Tower, carrying a rifle, shotgun, and other firearms. Before doing so, he had already killed his wife and mother at home, leaving notes describing headaches and thoughts he couldn't control. From his vantage point overlooking the campus, he opened fire on students and pedestrians for about 90 minutes. By the time police shot and killed him, 17 people were dead and 31 wounded, one of the first mass shootings in modern American history. An autopsy later revealed a brain tumor pressing on Whitman's amygdala, the region linked to emotion and aggression. Psychologists still debate how much that tumor influenced his behavior versus his own psychological collapse. The incident prompted the birth of modern SWAT teams and police sniper training, transforming law enforcement tactics worldwide. It also changed public awareness of mental health within military veterans. More than 5 decades later, the shadow of that tower still looms over American history as the moment the nation realized how one man with a rifle could shatter a city in minutes.
Martin Bryant, the Port Arthur Massacre, April 28, 1996, Tasmania, Australia. Martin Bryant, a 28-year-old man with borderline intellectual disability and a history of social alienation, carried a semi-automatic rifle into the Port Arthur Historic Site, one of the island's top tourist destinations. Without warning, he began firing inside a cafe packed with visitors, then continued through nearby areas, shooting anyone in view. Within about 30 minutes, 35 people were dead and more than 20 injured, the worst mass shooting in Australian history. Bryant was captured alive the next day after setting fire to a guest house where 2 hostages died. He later pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. No clear motive ever emerged beyond attention-seeking and rage against perceived slights. The massacre stunned Australia and triggered instant reform. Within weeks, the government banned most semi-automatic firearms and enacted a nationwide gun buyback that removed hundreds of thousands of weapons from circulation. The laws remain a global reference point for rapid policy change after tragedy. The Port Arthur Massacre shows how one day of violence can reshape an entire nation's relationship with guns.
Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the Columbine High School Massacre. April 20th, 1999, Littleton, Colorado. Seniors Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold entered their school armed with rifles, shotguns, and homemade pipe bombs. They had planned a complex bomb-and-shoot attack to kill hundreds, but when their explosives failed to detonate, they turned to their guns instead. In under an hour, they murdered 13 people and injured 21, then took their own lives in the library. Their writings and videos showed a twisted blend of grandiosity, resentment, and suicidal fantasy, a desire to be remembered. Investigators found no single cause. Bullying, mental illness, and media culture each played partial roles. Columbine became a blueprint for copycats and a turning point for security worldwide. Schools introduced lockdown drills and zero-tolerance discipline policies. Police developed active shooter entry training to replace standby tactics used there. The event did more than shock. It redrew the map of modern fear, turning classrooms into fortresses and America's conversation on youth rage and guns into a permanent mourning.
Sung Hui Cho, the Virginia Tech Massacre. April 16, 2007, Blacksburg, Virginia. Sung Hui Cho, a 23-year-old English major diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression, began his rampage by shooting 2 students in a dormitory early in the morning. 2 hours later, he returned, this time to Norris Hall, chaining the main doors shut from the inside before firing into classrooms full of students and professors. In just 11 minutes, Cho killed 32 people and wounded 17 others, committing suicide as police broke through the doors. It remains the deadliest school shooting in U.S. history. Warning signs had appeared for years: violent writings, stalking complaints, and a court order for psychiatric evaluation that never reached federal gun check systems. He legally purchased his weapons despite a record that should have denied him access. The massacre transformed university policy nationwide. Colleges created emergency text alerts, upgraded door locks, and expanded counseling outreach. Lawmakers tightened background check databases to include mental health rulings. Beyond policy, Virginia Tech became shorthand for the hidden cost of silence. Students and staff often noticed Cho's unraveling, but didn't know how or when to act. The campus rebuilt, yet every annual wreath-laying still reminds America that bureaucracy and hesitation can be as lethal as bullets.
Nidal Malik Hassan, the Fort Hood shooting. November 5, 2009, inside the Soldier Readiness Processing Center at Fort Hood, Texas, Army psychiatrist Major Nidal Hassan opened fire on fellow soldiers preparing for deployment. Within minutes, he killed 13 people and wounded over 30 before being stopped and shot by a civilian police officer. Hassan had spent months emailing radical cleric Anwar al-Awlaki and warning superiors that he believed Muslims should not fight in U.S. wars against other Muslims. These signs were ignored to avoid religious profiling. He entered the base that morning armed with 2 handguns, one fitted with a laser sight, and targeted unarmed service members. Paralyzed after the shootout, Hassan was later convicted by court-martial and sentenced to death. The attack forced the military to re-examine its insider threat systems and mental health screenings. Fort Hood stands as a bitter lesson. Even institutions built on discipline and surveillance are vulnerable when ideology and inaction collide.
James Holmes, the Aurora theater shooting. July 20th, 2012, in Aurora, Colorado, hundreds of moviegoers filled a midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises when James Holmes, a 24-year-old neuroscience student, entered through a side door dressed in ballistic armor. He threw smoke canisters and fired indiscriminately with multiple weapons, killing 12 people and injuring 70. Holmes had been under psychiatric care, describing fantasies of murder to his therapist just weeks earlier. His journal revealed a clinical style of madness, an experiment on whether he could eliminate human value. The case sparked fierce debate over insanity versus culpability. In 2015, he was sentenced to life without parole after the jury failed to reach a unanimous vote for death. The trial and its aftermath pushed Colorado to improve mental health threat assessments and emergency exit protections in theaters and arenas. The Aurora shooting remains the moment America realized terror can arrive not in political form, but on a summer movie night in the dark.
Adam Lanza, the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. December 14th, 2012, Newtown, Connecticut. 20-year-old Adam Lanza began his morning by shooting his mother at their home, then drove to Sandy Hook Elementary School, carrying a semi-automatic rifle and 2 pistols. He broke through a locked glass door and, in less than 10 minutes, killed 20 children aged 6 and 7, along with 6 educators before turning a gun on himself as police arrived. Investigators later found years of withdrawal and untreated mental deterioration. Lanza had become obsessed with mass killers, spending hours studying previous shootings online. Experts said he exhibited severe social anxieties and anorexia, amplified by isolation and his mother's stockpile of legally owned firearms. The slaughter of first graders shocked the world. In its aftermath, Connecticut passed sweeping gun control and background check laws. Congress debated federal reforms that ultimately stalled. Schools nationwide installed buzz-in doors, panic buttons, and lockdown drills, turning security into daily.
Aaron Alexis, the Washington Navy Yard shooting, September 16, 2013, Washington, D.C. Aaron Alexis, a 34-year-old Navy contractor and former reservist, entered Building 197 at the Navy Yard with a shotgun smuggled inside a bag. He moved through hallways and offices, shooting indiscriminately at coworkers and civilian employees. Before he was killed in a gun battle with police, he had murdered 12 people and injured several others. Alexis had long shown signs of mental disorder. He heard voices, acted paranoid, and complained about microwave attacks by the government. Still, security clearances and job contracts were renewed without deep mental health screening. He legally bought his firearm in Virginia weeks before the attack. The massacre caused an immediate reevaluation of background checks and workplace security for federal contractors. It exposed the fault line between privacy and protection, how systems built to guard national secrets failed to guard their own people. For Washington, the attack was a shock inside the heart of power, showing that danger can emerge not from foreign plots, but from unnoticed suffering within. Today, the Navy Yard stands rebuilt, its walls etched with the names of those killed in a tragedy that proved mental health is a matter of national security.
Elliot Rodger, the Isla Vista killings. May 23, 2014, the small college community of Isla Vista, California, became ground zero for a new kind of extremism. Elliot Rodger, a 22-year-old student at Santa Barbara City College, launched a rampage that left 6 people dead and 14 injured before taking his own life. Rodger began by stabbing 3 roommates to death in his apartment, then drove through town shooting and running down pedestrians and cyclists. Hours earlier, he had uploaded a YouTube video titled Retribution, in which he ranted against women for rejecting him and men he believed were more desirable. He also sent a 137-page manifesto to family and therapists detailing years of loneliness, entitlement, and hatred of human relationships. Police had previously performed a welfare check after reports of his disturbing posts, but found him polite and composed, missing the danger completely. Rodger's language and online following later formed a core of the self-identified incel movement that romanticizes misogynistic violence. The Isla Vista killings exposed how mental illness, digital echo chambers,
Dylan Roof, the Charleston church shooting, June 17, 2015, Charleston, South Carolina. That evening, 21-year-old Dylan Roof, a self-described white supremacist, entered a Wednesday night Bible study at Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, one of the oldest black congregations in America. For nearly an hour, he sat quietly with 12 worshipers reading scripture together. Then he stood up, pulled a handgun, and opened fire. He murdered 9 people, including the church's pastor and state senator Clementa Pinckney. Roof left one survivor alive to tell the story. Investigators soon found a racist online manifesto and photographs of him posing with Confederate flags and hate symbols. He later told police he wanted to spark a race war. The attack was prosecuted as a federal hate crime, the first of its kind to result in a death sentence in modern U.S. history. The aftermath brought national mourning and an overdue reckoning with the legacy of racial violence in America's South. South Carolina removed the Confederate flag from its state house grounds after more than 50 years, and churches across the nation reconsidered their own security. Charleston's tragedy became a paradoxical symbol of grace. Victims' families publicly forgave the gunmen in court.
Omar Mateen, the Pulse nightclub shooting, June 12, 2016, Orlando, Florida. Omar Mateen, a 29-year-old security guard with a history of anger and violence, walked into Pulse, a popular LGBTQ+ nightclub, just after 2 a.m. Armed with a semi-automatic rifle and handgun, he began shooting into the crowd of more than 300 people. The siege lasted 3 hours until SWAT officers stormed the building and killed him. By then, 49 people were dead and 53 injured, making it the deadliest attack on the LGBTQ+ community in U.S. history. Mateen called 911 during the attack, pledging loyalty to ISIS, though investigators found no direct terror links. Evidence later showed a life fractured by hatred, self-loathing, and radical posturing online. For survivors and families, Pulse became a symbol of both mourning and pride. International monuments and vigils spread across 49 countries within days. The attack renewed debates on assault weapon bans, homophobia, and domestic terrorism. Today, the Pulse site is a memorial museum that tells a story not only of loss, but of a community that refused to disappear.
Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas shooting. October 1st, 2017, Las Vegas, Nevada. During the Route 91 Harvest Festival on the Vegas Strip, 64-year-old Stephen Paddock opened fire from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. For 11 minutes, he rained more than 1,000 rounds onto the crowd of 22,000.
killing 60 and injuring almost 900 before taking his own life. It remains the deadliest mass shooting by a lone gunman in U.S. history. Police found 23 firearms, thousands of rounds of ammunition, and cameras set up to monitor the hallway outside his suite. No manifesto, no help, no clear motive was ever discovered. Paddock had money, no criminal record, and a passion for gambling and meticulous control. Investigators believe that cold perfectionism became its own fuel. The Las Vegas attack sparked nationwide reform efforts on high-capacity weapons and led to the federal ban on bump stocks. For a city known for noise and light, that night ended in silence. A place built for escape turned into a field of unanswered questions.
Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland school shooting. February 14, 2018, Parkland, Florida. At Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz, a former student expelled for violent behavior, arrived with a legally purchased AR-15-style rifle. Within minutes, he opened fire inside the freshman building, killing 17 students and staff and injuring 17 others. He escaped by blending with survivors before being arrested nearby. Cruz's troubled history was well documented. Abandonment, foster care, violent outbursts, and repeated warnings to police and the FBI that he planned a school shooting. Despite this, no coordinated intervention ever occurred. His case became a symbol of unheeded red flags and system failure. When students returned to classes, they refused silence. Out of their grief grew the March for Our Lives movement, one of the largest youth-led protests since the Vietnam era, demanding gun law reform and safer campuses. Cruz received 34 consecutive life sentences in 2022. Parkland proved that trauma can turn teenagers into the strongest advocates for change, all because their classroom became a war zone.
Patrick Crusius, the El Paso Walmart shooting. August 3, 2019, El Paso, Texas. 21-year-old Patrick Crusius drove 10 hours to target a busy Walmart near the U.S.-Mexico border. Armed with a rifle, he opened fire on families shopping for school supplies, killing 23 people and injuring 22. Moments earlier, he had posted a 4-page manifesto citing the racist Great Replacement theory, claiming Latinos were invading Texas. The shooting was classified as domestic terrorism, its ideological lineage traced to online hate forums that had inspired earlier attacks in Christchurch and Oslo. Crusius was arrested alive and later pleaded guilty to federal hate crime charges, receiving 90 consecutive life sentences. El Paso's community responded with unity rallies titled El Paso Strong, turning fear into defiance. The attack underscored how algorithmic echo chambers can turn digital anger into real-world slaughter, and why combating hate speech online has become a matter of public safety.
Salvatore Ramos, the Uvalde school shooting. May 24, 2022, Uvalde, Texas. 18-year-old Salvatore Ramos, a high school dropout known for social withdrawal and violent posts online, shot his grandmother at home before driving to Robb Elementary School. Crashing his truck into a ditch, he entered the school armed with 2 semi-automatic rifles purchased just after his birthday. He locked himself in adjoining classrooms and opened fire on students and teachers. For 77 minutes, nearly 400 law enforcement officers waited in the hallway as shots continued. By the time a Border Patrol tactical team breached the door and killed him, 19 children and 2 teachers were dead. The delayed response became an international scandal and the focus of multiple investigations into training, command structure, and accountability. Ramos had posted cryptic warnings on social media days before the attack, but no one acted. His legally bought rifles showed how easily firearms could be acquired despite obvious instability. The massacre inspired Congress to pass the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, tightening background checks for young buyers and funding school safety programs, the first federal gun safety bill in nearly 30 years.